Welcome, apprentice. Step carefully into the dark, damp shade of the forest tree line. Go ahead and wipe that heavy, wet mud from your boots and gather around the fire, because today's explainer is a profound journey deep into the old archives. We're going to breathe in the scent of pine and rich earth to uncover a truly dark folklore tale. This is a lesson about a master who proved that ruin is not the opposite of life, but actually one of its oldest, most essential doors. This is the tale of Morvan Thrice-Buried and the magic of sacred decay. Today, I am your forest guide, and I'm going to teach you the true power of what literally lies beneath your feet. We are going to untangle the roots of history together, and I promise you, before the embers of our fire die down, you will completely understand the ancient, catastrophic battles fought between the natural magic of the living soil and the terrifying demonic powers of stagnation. So wrap your cloak tight. Let's begin. I want you to whisper this ancient mantra to yourself. Decay is not the enemy of life. It is life learning another shape. Really let those words settle into your bones. Because long before rivers had names, long before the very first stone was ever stacked upon another, there was decay. It arrived quietly, like a gentle guest in the hush of the woods right after a creature took its final breath. Now, most kings and high priests absolutely feared it. They built massive stone tombs just to hide from it. But think about it using a really simple nature analogy. When a heavy, overripe fruit detaches and falls from a high branch, hitting the forest floor, it isn't an ending, right? The bruised flesh breaks open, and it instantly becomes a sweet feast for the worker ants. Or think about when an ancient towering oak tree finally cracks and splinters under the terrifying heat of a lightning strike. It isn't just destroyed. That shattered, charred wood becomes a nursery for creeping moss. It becomes a shelter for beetles and a pathway for hidden searching roots. You see, the natural world doesn't throw anything away. It literally has no concept of trash. It simply changes the language of matter. It translates it patiently until death can be read as nourishment.
It is absolutely crucial that you understand the profound difference between holy decay and corrupted rot. Holy decay, which is true natural renewal, is warm, it's moving, it's humble, and it's full of this constant, generous exchange. If you've ever plunged your hands deep into a pile of autumn leaves in late November, you know what I mean. You feel the heat. It's the steam rising off a damp compost pile on a crisp, freezing morning. It is literally the soil breathing. Corrupted rot, on the other hand? Well, that's what happens when arrogance and demons interfere with the natural order. It is cold, it is deeply possessive, violently repetitive, and entirely stagnant. Our story today focuses on the master of this corrupted rot, a demon named Varkul. Varkul was terrified of endings. He wanted to freeze time. He sought to preserve wounds forever in a state of fresh agony, just consuming the world around him without ever feeding a single thing back into the earth. It was a bottomless hunger with zero gratitude.
All right, let's dive right into Section 1, The Child of the Plague Field, Morvan's Origins. Our hero is a boy named Morvan. When he was just 7 years old, living in this remote, muddy farming village, a demonic sickness swept through the valley. And this wasn't a normal fever. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't a fever at all. It was a frozen plague. It was a curse where the flesh of the afflicted spoiled, but magically would not return to the soil. Crops in the fields blackened, their stalks got all brittle and dead, but they completely refused to crumble in the wind. The natural cycle just hit a terrifying wall. And young Morvan caught the sickness. His pulse dropped so dangerously low and his skin grew so icy that the frightened, exhausted villagers actually believed he was dead. They buried him by mistake under the cursed earth of the plague field. So he wakes up in absolute dark, trapped beneath 6 feet of dirt. But instead of screaming, instead of just going mad with panic, Morvan listened. He heard a sound that no human had ever really paid attention to. He heard the frustrated, starving soil. The earth was groaning because it was locked out of its natural cycle of consumption and rebirth.
Recognizing the earth's pain, Morvan pressed his small hands into the heavy mud and whispered, "Take me if you must, but take me honestly." And the soil heard him. It didn't eat him, it yielded. Morvan clawed his way up, breaking the surface and crawling out of his own grave. He emerged with black earth packed tight under his fingernails, and his skin smelled intensely of heavy rain, old broken wood, and the crisp clean air of the first morning after a long terrible sickness. From that day until the very end of his life, he was known as Morvan Thrice-Buried.
Now, the source of that terrible freezing plague was a vile artifact known as the Crown of Stagnant Flesh. This was the dark relic worn by the demon Varkul, the closed grave. Imagine a crown that isn't made of gold or jewels, but instead looks like a jagged ring of black teeth biting endlessly into a band of dried, leathery skin. Varkul didn't march with armies. He didn't want to conquer the living. His ambition was actually much worse. He wanted to chain the very law of decay itself. The crown terrified powerful kings and humble farmers alike because it offered this twisted, obscene version of immortality. Under its influence, nothing decomposed, sure, but absolutely no new life could grow either. It was a world put on pause. Armor rusted right into the ribs of fallen warriors on old battlefields, and those defeated soldiers were magically preserved standing up, just eternal monuments to their own failure. The crown's greatest, most insidious poison was psychological. It made endings look permanent. It convinced the whole world that ruin was a final destination, rather than a doorway.
Moving deeper into the woods, we arrive at Section 2. The Mushroom Cord. To fight a demon who literally controlled time and stagnation, Morvan knew he needed an older, quieter magic. So he traveled far beyond the edges of the maps, deep into the damp twilight of the Hill of Hollow Roots, to study the mycelium. Morvan learned that underneath the visible soil, beneath the grass and the fallen leaves, there is a vast, infinitely complex, hidden network. Through these microscopic fungal threads, a dying, splintered birch tree can actually push its remaining nutrients through the dirt to feed a young, struggling oak miles away. The mushroom court, which is the ancient consciousness of this network, didn't speak with a booming voice or written words. They communicated with the young boy through the taste of copper on his tongue, sudden shifts in barometric pressure, and flashes of ancient memories of forests that had burned thousands of years ago. Sitting in the dark for months, they taught Morvan the ultimate patience of the mycelium. They taught him that true renewal isn't some single flashy miracle of light. It is a vast network of quiet, dark generosity. The forest is constantly talking. It's mourning its fallen, trading resources, and healing in the pitch black of the underground.
For his immense patience and his willingness to just sit in the dark, the Mushroom Court gifted Morvan a tool of unparalleled natural magic. They gave him the Staff of the Listening Ear. And this was no ordinary piece of carved wood. It was grown directly from a pale root that had naturally died 3 times and stubbornly sprouted 4. At the very tip of the staff bloomed a dense gray, ear-shaped mushroom that pulsed faintly, almost like a slow heartbeat. Through this living staff, Morvan gains an incredible ability. When he pressed it to the ground, he could literally listen to the hidden, desperate appetite of the dirt. He could walk into a barren, failing field and instantly diagnose the sickness. He could hear if the land was crying out for the alkaline bite of ash, the rich heat of manure, the slow calcium release of old crushed bones, or, in some tragic cases, if the earth simply needed the spoken forgiveness of the desperate farmers who had exhausted and overworked it.
Now, my apprentice, I have a crucial question for you. Think of this as a test. Which soil carries the true power of renewal? Let's say that you are tasked with bringing a completely dead valley back to life.
If you had to choose a battlefield to plant your most precious, fragile seeds, which one are you picking? Would you choose the sterile, perfectly preserved dirt of the bone fields, where the pristine skeletons of legendary warriors are magically frozen in time, glittering in the sun but refusing to yield a single inch to the earth? Or would you turn your back on that glory and choose the steaming, foul-smelling, pitch-black muck of Gorham's Hollow, an ancient, wet compost pit teeming with blind, writhing rot? Think carefully about what you have learned of the forest so far. Which do you choose?
Let's see if you were right. If you chose the compost trench, you are learning well. You've got the makings of a true guide. You see, the bone fields are an illusion. They are crowded with stubborn memory and vain pride. They are unyielding, they're gray, they're dry, and fundamentally, they're dead. They ruin the land for miles around them because they arrogantly refuse the mercy and the absolute necessity of decomposition. But the compost trench, it is black, it is rich, it's radiating heat, and it is teeming with worms and insects. It is violently alive. Historical records actually tell us that Morvan traveled to those famous bone fields. He planted his staff, used his magic to break the arrogant spell of preservation, and commanded the earth to finally eat. He allowed creeping moss and hungry lichen to swarm over the ancient bones, turning a monument of dead war into a sprawling, buzzing meadow of white flowers. He proved, unequivocally, that the living, transforming, messy soil is infinitely more powerful than the stubborn, spotless ruins of past glory.
Now that you understand the true nature of the soil, apprentice, it's time to learn its core philosophy. Section 3. The Doctrine of the Dirt.
What you're looking at are the 4 laws of sacred decay. And when these were whispered through the villages, they terrified hoarding kings way more than the threat of any invading army. Let's recite them together and really feel the weight of these words. 1. Nothing is waste until greed names it waste. A broken floorboard, a rusted nail, or a fallen crow's feathers still carries profound usefulness to the earth. Only human impatience calls it trash. 2. Rot must feed life. If decay spreads through a forest or a society without nourishing the next generation, it is not nature, it is corruption. True rot gives back. 3. Every ending must be given a doorway. Grief needs a voice and a tear to escape. A physical corpse needs the embrace of the earth to move on. Trapping an ending is just torture. And 4. Do not preserve what must transform. Soil, my apprentice, does not obey those who are ashamed to touch it, and life absolutely does not reward those who try to lock it in a cage.
That 4th law is the most dangerous, because it warns of the danger of hoarding forms. Immortality without renewal becomes a sealed, airless room. Even the most breathtaking beauty suffocates when it cannot change. There's this famous story of how Morvan used to test his new disciples. He'd give them a patch of earth and ask them to grow a breathtakingly beautiful garden. They would spend months cultivating rare black roses and glowing nighttime orchids. But here was the catch. The very moment the garden reached its absolute, flawless peak of aesthetic beauty, Morvan ordered them to take sites and cut it all down to compost. The cruel students, while they enjoyed the destruction, learned nothing and were sent away. The highly sentimental students flatly refused to destroy such beauty. They hoarded the form, and they too failed. Only the truly wise students wept tears of genuine loss, swung their blades, chopped the beautiful flowers, composted them into the dirt, replanted the seeds, and understood. You have to trust the cycle.
Let's see how all of this builds to the violent climax of our historical explainer. Chapter 4, The Cathedral of Unrotting Saints.
This cathedral was Varkel's final, towering fortress of stagnation. It stood high up on a mountain, built of blinding white marble. I need you to remember this absolute truth.
A place where nothing decays is a place where nothing is allowed to complete its sentence. Imagine walking into this terrifying place. The smell of ozone and old dead dust just clogs your lungs. Thousands of wax candles burn brightly on the altars, but their wicks never shorten and their wax never melts. Baskets of freshly cut spring flowers are frozen in time, their petals stiff and cold, never wilting. And worst of all, lining the massive stone walls, inside clear glass coffins, sit the false saints. Their physical bodies are preserved perfectly. They are unaging and pristine. But if you look closely at the walls of the glass, you can see their magical shadows clawing frantically at the lids, begging for the release of death. It was a fortress of absolute, sterile preservation. It was the ultimate atrocity against the moving, breathing natural world.
So, Morvan arrives at the towering heavy oak doors, and he didn't bring an army of swordsmen or archers. No, he brought a rough burlap sack filled with dirt to perform the rite of reversal. Step 1. He walked straight past the horrified demonic guards and poured living, writhing compost, damp moss, and the dark soil from his own childhood grave right onto the polished, sterile marble floor. Step 2. As the demon Varkal shrieked and attacked him with crippling visions of his own death and fear, Morvan pushed through the pain. He drove his staff of the listening ear straight down, cracking the stone altar. He commanded the dead, polished wood of the pews and the cathedral rafters to remember the wild forests they had been violently cut from. Massive, violent old roots erupted upward from the floorboards, completely shattering the stone. And step 3. In all the chaos, he lunged forward and seized Varkal's crown of stagnant flesh with his bare hands. The black teeth of the artifact instantly bit his palms down to the bone. But Morvan didn't pull away. He let his hot, living blood flow directly into the ancient artifact to rot the demon's magic honestly. Tiny, aggressive gray mushrooms grew directly from Morvan's bleeding wounds, prying their way under the crown's black teeth and loosening its grip on reality.
When the crown finally broke with a sound like splitting thunder, the cathedral didn't explode, it exhaled. Centuries of trapped, stifled change rushed forward all at once, catching up with the present in a violent, beautiful wave of natural time. In minute 1, the eternal candles finally guttered out into smoke, and the frozen, stiff flowers instantly bowed, browned, and wilted into dust. By hour 1, the immense pressure of the return time caused the glass coffins to splinter and crack. The false saints within physically sighed in profound relief as their perfectly preserved skin finally softened, sinking gratefully into the earth. By day 1, the pristine, unnatural white marble of the walls was sweating thick mineral salt, cracking under the weight of explosive green moss and aggressive vines. And by year 1, the fortress was completely gone. Pilgrims had returned to the grassy hill, not to worship sterile, terrifying saints in glass boxes, but to plant living, breathing apple and pear orchards right in the beautiful, fertile ruins of the demon's vanity.
But listen, wielding such immense power in the natural world always, without exception, extracts a heavy, personal toll from its master. Which brings us to Section 5. The cost of the magic. Remember how the demonic crown brutally bit into Morvan's hands during the battle? Well, the magic mixed with his blood, and it left a permanent, heartbreaking curse. The tragic irony of Morvan's great, world-saving victory was this. As the ultimate, undisputed master of natural renewal, he was forever cursed to never hoard forms himself. He could never truly settle down. If he ever touched an object with even a shred of selfish desire, wanting to keep it forever and halt its natural progression, it instantly decayed in his grip.
A beautiful painted clay cup that he just wanted to keep on a mantle would literally crack in his hands. A warm, finely woven winter cloak he admired and wished to save for the next season would fray into useless threads overnight. Even sturdy wooden houses, offered to him as rewards by grateful kings, would mysteriously sag, leak, and rot at the foundation until he finally refused ownership and walked away. He had bound himself to the wheel. He had to live the ultimate, lonely truth of his own magic.
And this deep sacrifice brings us to his final, most enduring lesson. Near the end of his recorded life, an aging Morvan visited a grand city that had been entirely burned to ash by a mundane, terrible fire. The weeping survivors begged the great master to use his earth magic to restore their city exactly as it was. Every street, every mansion, every cobble. But Morvan looked at the smoking ruins and replied, "Restoration can become another prison. Renewal must honor the past without obeying it completely." Morvan gently but firmly refused to just magically rebuild the old opulent mansions of the wealthy. Instead, he worked with the survivors. He mixed the deep gray ash of the city with spoiled wine, horse dung, and wet river mud. Through the spring, he taught them to grow sprawling public gardens exactly where the gated mansions once stood. And he planted massive, fruitful orchards right where the heavy stone tax offices used to be. He taught them that a disaster is terrible, for sure, but it is also a clearing.
And so our lesson comes to an end, apprentice. The fire is burning low. The legends say Morvan eventually walked off into the heavy autumn rain, followed closely by a trailing cloud of crows and clicking beetles, leaving behind a world that finally understood how to heal itself. I want to leave you with this provocative thought as you walk back into your own life. When things break down around you, when a long, comfortable season of your life undeniably ends, do you desperately try to hoard the dead, dry leaves? Do you build glass coffins for your failures? Or do you take a breath, open your hands, and trust the ancient cycle of the forest? If decay is truly just the door, apprentice, what will you feed to the soil? Think on that as the woods grow dark, and I will see you in our next explainer.